Selamat datang kembali. Welcome back to Bali Unveiled. Today we're going to talk about Indonesia for a change, not just Bali, and more particularly about its history. Because yes, Indonesia has a rich history. And if you're curious to learn more about that, because I'm only going to scratch the surface, I'm going to talk about four periods that are pretty important, but there are so much more to know and to learn. I mean, each island has its history, so an archipelago of several thousand islands, oh, I'm sure there's so much to learn. But we're only going to scratch the surface and let's go into it. We're going to go back in time and look at the bigger picture. So around 1st century AD and 7th century AD, a lot of Indian merchants were going through the islands, exchanging and trading goods, food or other materials maybe, and they brought and shared their religions, which were Hinduism and Buddhism. And those first religions and have really shaped the early culture of Indonesia. We can see them through various empires, and I think the best way to picture that era is through the big temples of Borobudur and Prambanan in the island of Java. So Java has for a lot of time been at the center of these exchanges with merchants and commerce because it is a big island and the Javanese people were very influential. That leads us to the second period I want to talk about, which is the Majapahit Empire. This empire dated back to 13th century AD, and it was one of the most influential of its time. It had a lot of maritime power, a lot of exchanges and commerce was being done by and supervised by this empire, and it stretched from Sumatra to New Guinea. So it covered almost what Indonesia is today. So this is the empire that really unified religion, Hinduism and Buddhism, and brought it to almost all the islands of the archipelago. And today's culture is heavily taking roots on this period, on the Majapahit period. So a lot of Hinduism, notably in Bali, take root in that culture. 3 centuries later, around 16th century AD, the Majapahit Empire falls to fighting against Islamic sultanates. So Islam in that period is being brought to Indonesia and really heavily influences the archipelago and the way religion is shared. These sultanates take the place of the Majapahit Empire, and Islam spreads across the archipelago. Nowadays, Indonesia is home to the most Muslims in the world. In the 16th century AD, a big change is led by Europeans, notably the British, Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese, that are seeking this spice-filled archipelago and want to take control. And after a few fights, the Dutch came on top. And the place that we call Indonesia today was called the Dutch West Indies for around 300 years. And it was the Dutch that occupied most of the islands, and the Dutch really influenced the archipelago, either socially, economically, architecturally, and even culinarily. And they were the ones who built the cities and brought agricultural practices that shaped the whole archipelago and islands, culture, everything were really influenced by how the Dutch ran things. Even the language, Bahasa Indonesia, was a lot influenced by the Dutch because the archipelago counts today around approximately 700 dialects and different languages. That's a lot. And when you try to communicate with people, well, if you don't know the language, it's pretty hard. And having an interpret for each island, each dialect, sounds complicated, no? So the Dutch tried to get a lingua franca, which is a common language to the archipelago, and they managed to take the Malay language, and shape it into what is Bahasa Indonesia today. They are the ones who pushed it, and Indonesian people also, they did it together, and it is now Bahasa Indonesia, and almost everybody speaks it. So, good thing, right? Even with all the great things the Dutch gave the Indonesian, they still sought independence, notably during the 20th century, where they fought, and during the World Wars, they were able to push back the Dutch, and on the 17th August 1945, they were able to declare independence. Today, Indonesia is a free country, independent country, and they have a democratic republic. And as you can see, today Indonesia is so diverse, and the culture and history has brought this country to where it is now. Rich, vibrant, home to so many different ethnicities and different people from thousands of islands. Thank you for listening to this history. Once again, if you're curious to learn more, feel free to go on the internet and look for more information. I know I didn't say much, but those are the basics if you want to know Indonesian history. Comment, like below if you wish. Subscribe, and just know that I have a whole playlist on Bali, especially, not Indonesia. But maybe I'll do some videos in the future where I explain a bit more of this history or even culture in Indonesia. So stay tuned for that. Terima kasih banyak. See you in the next one.